Good morning, all, and welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition press conference for June 14th, 2022. Today with me on the panel is I'll do it from my right as usual, none other than the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, Member of Parliament, and to his right, economist Mr. Elson Lowe. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and the first part of the statement will be read by the leader. Leader?
Good morning. APNU AFC condemns the execution of Quindon Bacchus. The APNU AFC condemns the execution of Quindon Bacchus by members of the Guyana Police Force. It is a case of murder and should be investigated as a crime. The Commission of Police's reassurance that it will be properly investigated must be taken with a pinch of salt. The same pronouncement was made when Isaiah Henry, Joel Henry, and Harris Singh were murdered. When Orrin Boston was executed by ranks of the Guyana Police Force, the same pronouncement was made by the Guyana Police Force. To date, we are nowhere close to justice for any one of them. What is even more worrying is the Guyana Police Force is not treating the matter as a crime, since it is being investigated by the Police Complaints Authority. There must be a criminal investigation into this matter, and the perpetrators of this crime must face the full force of the law. The Guyana Police Force and the government of Guyana must recognize that they are complicit in these crimes when they protect rogue policemen, because this signals that they can commit serious crimes, heinous crimes, and not face the full force of the law. It is even worse if they are not rogue cops, but are carrying out the instructions of their superiors. The rule of law is being further eroded in Guyana. PPP's incompetence, corruption, and discrimination are evident all around Guyana. PPP discrimination in Region 2. Recent visits to communities are revealing PPP sees incompetence, corruption, and discrimination. A recent outreach by the opposition to Queenstown and Dartmouth on the East Coast, and Karawab and Kabakaburi in the Pomeroon River revealed this unfortunate reality. In Queenstown, the residents showed the visiting team the only street that has been paved in the community is Bridgemahan Street, in which the PPP supporters live. All other streets are in a deplorable state. The same is true in Dartmouth, where Damon Street, in which the lone PPP supporter lives, is done and the others are left in a deplorable state. Residents contend that it is a case of ethnic and political discrimination. Residents in the Pomeroon River also noted that they are being discriminated against by the PPP. They further contend that there is little or no drainage and irrigation work being done. As a consequence, they are losing their crops and livestock. They further contend that infrastructure work is poorly done, and the contractors tell them that that is what they are directed to do. Residents of the Pomeroon are demanding that the mouth of the river be dredged to ease the flooding that is constantly destroying their crops. Opposition proposed National Community Enhancement Plan. Since January this year, the opposition has embarked on outreaches all across Guyana. These outreach programs have caused us to conclude that there is no plan for the development of communities across Guyana. It is in this context that we reveal the APNUFC plan for the development of communities in Guyana. As we struggle for a better quality of life for each Guyanese household, it must be noted that we have called for our people to be guaranteed a livable income. We must concurrently ensure that communities are peaceful, are safe, peaceful and pleasing, clean and healthy, physically appealing, hospitable, socially vibrant and inclusive. To achieve this vision, a coalition government will launch a national community enhancement plan with clear objectives and strategies. This plan will be drafted, implemented and monitored with the involvement of residents, local councils and social groups within each community. As early as now, we table before you for public discussion the components we think ought to be included in a countrywide community enhancement plan. Better local governance at the NDC and village levels, namely more human and financial capacity, more inclusivity, participation, and more accountability. Concrete actions include considerably larger government subventions to NDCs and village councils, regular training of council staff, higher remuneration for councillors and staff to attract skills, and open meetings and wider public involvement in local decision making. We need to reboot local democracy. Resuscitation and expansion of the Rural Agricultural Infrastructural Development Program RAID. The objective of RAID, which started under the coalition government, will remain the same. The clearing of land-backed villages, construction of secondary D&I canals and control structures, rehabilitation of access dams, the establishment of farmland and pastures, and distribution of planting materials to farmers. 3. The establishment of land maintenance and enhancement work crews in NDCs and villages. These crews will be permanently employed and be responsible for light infrastructure works, cleanup, sanitation, landscaping, and beautification and environmental protection. Crews will be funded by the central government, be trained and equipped as required, and will respect gender equality. There must be no discrimination in the allocation of resources, bringing an end to the present practice of ethnic and political discrimination. 4. Construction of multi-purpose recreational facilities. These facilities will be larger in size and scope and the current traditional community centers. They will be used to promote sports in schools as sites for larger community activities such as fairs, celebration, and open concerts, as a space where residents can recreate, exercise, play, and socialize, and as spaces to foster community social cohesion. 5. Creation of more local employment and self-employment opportunities. Opportunities will be created through purposeful efforts to use local workers, service providers, and the contractors to undertake projects in the National Community Enhancement Plan as much as possible. Outside of the plan, we have proposed ideas such as using local cooks and caterers for providing meals, an expanded national school feeding program, retraining and reorienting our police force towards community-oriented policing. Here, we must all recognize that the police alone can rarely solve public safety problems, but must establish and nurture interactive partnerships with relevant stakeholders such as community members, groups, private businesses, media, and non-profits such as religious bodies. 7. Establish a small grants program to support grassroots organized initiatives and activities aimed at building a sense of community spirit, Such initiatives and activities could include village fairs, festivals, and commemoration days. In our National Community Enhancement Plan, no community or village and no NDC or CDC or village council will be marginalized. We will engage with and support all. However, our planning must recognize the different circumstances and levels of development in communities will require different responses and levels of resources. This reality will require interventions to be tailored to specific local needs and circumstances. To win public trust and support, the National Community Enhancement Plan will be responsive, transparent, and accountable. We cannot transform Guyana without first transforming our communities.
Thank you. And now we will have the last part of the statement being read by Mr. Elson Lowe.
Good day. The PPP must address the cost of living crisis. Fellow citizens, the PPP would like to pretend that Guyana does not produce a drop of oil. They would like to pretend that the country is not earning additional revenue as a consequence of the oil price shock that has engulfed the entire world. This is why we are hearing them say that nothing more can be done about rising petrol prices at the pump. There is a real risk that oil prices will continue to rise, driving the cost of living even higher. As the country earns more revenue from these high prices, is the government going to let Guyanese suffer? Is that the plan? We are calling on the government to bring the price of gasoline down now and insulate Guyanese from any further price increases. This can be done through a continuation of the existing excise tax policy. This means implementing a negative excise tax. The government should ensure gas prices do not increase above a determined level by compensating suppliers for any price increases where the excise tax reductions have already been exhausted. This will help to bring prices down across a wide basket of goods, thereby easing the cost of living crisis. The APNU-AFC is committed to ensuring all Guyanese benefit from the rapid growth of our economy. Unlike the PPP, we are not prepared to stand idly by and watch our people suffer. Guyanese, as we are on the topic of the biting cost of living, can you imagine that the PPP has had before it since January a proposal to increase the minimum wage to $60,000 per month and is doing nothing about this? The APNU-AFC calls on the PPP government to implement the proposal and bring relief to our people. All stakeholders, from unions to civil society organizations to newspapers, have come out in favor of a long overdue increase in the minimum wage. It should be noted that some private businesses, of their own accord, are increasing salaries. We commend them. The PPP does not care that the poor are the most affected and feel the pain of this cost of living crisis the most. They only care about themselves, their friends, and their families. They are so transparent in their selfishness and greed that Guyanese from all across our society are filled with disgust.
Thank you. As is customary, we will take questions from the member of the media, and we will have you do so by raising your hand, identifying the media house in which you are part of, and we will begin with questions on the press statement. All right, so I see the hand of Stabrook News. One moment. I'm not hearing you.
Are you hearing me better now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. You can go ahead.
Okay. David Putana, the Static News. My question is not directed to the press statement, but it deals with the police.
Would
Mr. Norton, yes.
One moment. Could I get back to you then on that question and have somebody who has a question on the press statement? We do that first and then you can go ahead. Is that okay?
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine, yes.
I saw the hand of Mr. Adam Harris.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Mr. Norton said that during the fan out in Region 2 and elsewhere, he noticed development along ethnic lines. You know, he called it ethnic discrimination. Sir, apart from dealing with it at forums like this, have you attempted to raise this issue with the government, you know, anybody in the government? Have you attempted to write to them if they don't want to talk to you?
I have not, but I know from the public pronouncement that the government is following. For instance, when we went to Little Africa and we pointed out what was happening there, by the time we left there, the second vice president was in there promising the world. When we went to Linden and we pointed out that they had removed the bridge from the budget and that they weren't further promoting the Mabura to Linden Road. Immediately after, the second vice president went and promised both will be done, even though he knew full well that they weren't prepared to do the Linden to Mabura Road, and it is only pressure that brought it. What we are doing is preparing, and even before I was opposition leader, we were sending things to the international community. We will prepare some more and send to the international community. But we are well aware that the government knows from two standpoints. One, they know what they are doing, and secondly, we are informing them in the public domain.
Thank you. Any other questions on the press statement?
Mr. Lowe, you talk about raising food prices, gasoline prices, and some economic things. I don't understand economics, so you talk about negative excise taxes and all of that. This is a global phenomenon. Are you suggesting that the government subsidize petroleum costs in Guyana, sir?
Thank you for your question. The first thing I would say is we already have in this country a policy of stabilizing the gas price. That's the excise tax policy that we cut the excise tax when we see a spike in the oil price. That's a policy that already exists. What we are saying is that we need to continue with that approach. Now that will require compensation to suppliers once the excise tax cuts have been exhausted. We are in a period right now where there is, as we indicated, a real risk that gas prices may continue to go up and may reach levels that we have not seen. They're already at levels that we have not seen for many years. But even today, you're seeing a gas price that's at $125 a barrel for crude, for Brent crude. This means that we cannot just say that there's nothing that can be done and you have to face the consequences, but rather that we need a policy approach to address the risk that there's going to be additional issues when it comes to the gas price, and that currently the price is already at a pretty much unbearable level for citizens. So it will require some compensation of suppliers. I take this opportunity to remind you that unlike most of the countries in the world, Guyana is an oil producer, and as a result is benefiting on one hand tremendously from a higher oil price and will benefit even more if the price climbs. So we must recognize that we are fortunate to be in this position, and that if we allow citizens to face the brunt of this, it is a deliberate choice by the administration.
Thank you.
quick follow-up. The argument could be that the U.S. is also an oil producer with oil in the reserve, and it's still experiencing high prices. How would you counter such a contention?
Yes, thank you. The U.S. is indeed experiencing higher prices. However, as I think you would of course recognize, the amount of oil that's consumed in the U.S. is far more than that is consumed in Guyana. We have a much smaller economy. The amount of the number of barrels of oil that we're producing far outstrips in terms of per person most countries. And so again, we are in a bit of a unique position. In fact, even today, we're producing far more barrels of oil per person than Trinidad would have, even at its peak. So, you know, we must again, as I indicated, recognize that we're fortunate and that there was a time when we were not producing oil and we were facing high gas prices. This is not that time, and thus we need to have a different strategy, a different approach.
Thank you. Any other questions on the press statement before we move on? All right, in that case, I will have Stabber.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes. Mr. Norton, in regards to your encounter yesterday with two officers from the Guyana Police Force while you were leaving the home of the family of Quindon Bacchus, have you received any explanation as to why you were being trailed? Or have you reached out to the police force to find out why you were being trailed?
No, but it's not just two police men. The video might have carried part of it. What happened is when I left, we saw a police vehicle and the two motorbikes, the two persons on motorcycles tracing us. So when I saw that, I stopped. And so they stopped. I came out, I went to the police in the vehicle, and I said to them, "Why are you tracing me? If I stop, you stop. If I move, you move. I am not violating the law. I'm a law-abiding citizen. Why are you following me?" The police in that vehicle did not answer. They merely stopped, and I think they turned back. As we progress along the East Coast coming down, I recognize though the police would have, in the vehicle would have turned back, the policemen on motorcycles were still following us. So I said, to confirm that they are following us, I will turn. And so I turned by Caldergy. And when we turned there, here it was the police again. So I stopped and I went to the policemen and said to them, "Why are you following me?" And they said they're following instructions. At that point, it does appear to me that it is a decision of the hierarchy of the police. Mind you, I am nowhere affected by the young men, because the young men were fairly polite, but you knew full well that they were acting on the instruction of senior police officers. And so I left, having had a conversation with them. They keep driving behind me until I meet home, and that was the end of it. I thought the best thing to do, while I might write the Guyana Police Force, I am not so sure that as a police state emerges, they have interest in anybody writing them. What they are seeking to do is to continue to violate people's rights and given the kind of instructions. I think there are other options to deal with the Guyana Police Force on these issues. What I try to do is to avoid a conflict with the young policemen. Generally, I will start by telling them, I know that you're carrying out instructions and that you're being used as political tools, and let it go. But there has to be action to deal with the Guyana Police Force. Leadership.
Following up, do you think it was a matter of security that they just followed you home, or it's more than that?
Well,
How do you view it?
first of all, if the police was providing me security, they would have been providing it all the time. So I don't think it's a case of them following me home. I think it's a case of them misusing their authority. And as the young men said, I know they must be blazing them in there. They are following instructions. So it couldn't be a case of them. First of all, how would they know I was going home?
Thank you.
I have a question here from Ms. Davina Bagot, who is still having some audio issues, and she would have sent her question via WhatsApp. She is saying Kaiser Knows recently carried a story that GRA has been spending at least 400 million in rental and maintenance fees. In addition, we know that there are other spaces being rented by the government to conduct state business. Is the opposition aware of this, and will the party be pushing to ensure that government invests in the construction of new buildings to avoid the high cost?
Well, first of all, we are aware of it. In fact, I recall when we were in government, we actually shifted out of some of those buildings. And you would know that there was a proposal to do a building for GRA, I think the Food Analyst Department, among others. So we will continue to push, we will push for the government to establish buildings that are properly done so as to facilitate the activities of government institutions. Of course, you know this government is bent on putting money in the hands of its cronies, and so they will not have that kind of a policy approach. In fact, we have observed that they have virtually they have taken away the lands that GRA was to be built on and give it to a private investor. So we are aware that the government's interest is not saving money for the government. In fact, the government's approach is one in which it does everything to ensure that its cronies, they get money. Look, let's look at the road that was recently opened on the East Bank. If this government was interested in saving money, what they would have done is while they were planning, they would have planned in a way that they didn't have to give an emergency contract to the road that they are now doing. But it is evident that they opened that road, had a fanfare, and then they know that that bottleneck is going to be there. And now what they will do is say it's emergency work and they don't have to go to tender. This has to be taken in the context, in the wider context of a government that refuses to appoint the Procurement Commission as pointed out by MP Ganesh Maipal. And so they are creating the conditions to be able to be involved in corruption. The reality is infrastructure work in the main is not to deliver services to the people. It seems that that is secondary to their corruption plan. And so I anticipate that they will continue to behave in that fashion, and it will take a new AP and new AFC government to develop a sensible policy of identifying buildings to be established, to be built for the work of the government. You only have to look, the PPP spent years in power. They are now opening police stations that we put in the budget, financed and built. And they are operating as if they are promoting the welfare of the policemen. For years they did nothing. All they're doing now is to open doors that we, as a government, placed in the budget and we were implementing. It is evident that the welfare of the policemen don't matter. It doesn't matter. And so I believe that you're not going to see a positive approach in terms of constructing buildings to house government departments. If you do a survey of the buildings that many government departments are in, you will recognize that it's another kind of a gravy train. And if you observe that a lot of senior government people are building buildings to rent space, etc., you can very well see the link and the direction that they are going.
All right. She has another question, Ms. Davina Bagot. She says the countries like the United States have slapped oil companies with a one-off tax, given their high earnings as a result of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Does the opposition support this idea in Guyana, given that our earnings remain staggering due to the oil contract with the company?
Like I said in a previous press conference, the government had a glorious opportunity to improve or to work to get more for Guyana. They didn't utilize that opportunity. My own view is that they should have, but they didn't. And if they didn't, I don't see them increasing any taxes, etc. One has to also look at the countries and decide whether it is feasible, and I think it is. It's a question of government consulting, obtaining some form of consensus, and moving ahead to ensure the Guyanese people benefit more. In fact, I have been on record as saying that the law provides for government to take action to ensure that the people of Guyana benefit. While I believe that there should be sanctity of contract, there is a lot of space for the government to act to ensure that we benefit more. And an APNU AFC government will utilize that space and act to ensure our people get more from our oil and gas resources.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Oh, Ms. Davina is saying she wanted to know whether the coalition supports the one-off tax.
The what?
The one-off tax, taking a one-off tax from the oil companies.
I believe essentially that the coalition has to review the present situation and then make its position clear. In the PNC, first of all, we have a group that is looking at oil. We will engage the AFC, and then the APNU AFC will make a clear pronouncement on the policies policies and approaches we intend to implement as it relates to the oil and gas sector.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I got my hand up.
Okay,
Adam,
go ahead.
Comrade, one of the things everyone is talking about is the distribution of cash, be it small amounts or what, to even members in communities that are supposed to be supportive of the party. Are you worried that such a distribution could influence people away from your party? I heard some comments in Haslington, for example, during the protests and all of that. Are you concerned?
Well, first of all, as a political party, we have already said to many of our supporters that this is taxpayers' money. It is unfortunate that it is disorganized and it is discriminatory in nature, and therefore that they should take the money. But we have also been on record and showing our people as we move around that these cash handouts cannot solve the major problem they have. The major problems they have will have to do with having a livable income. How do you, when you get a one-off $250,000 or a one-off $25,000, you still have got to go and face the cost of living, the rent, etc. So these are not measures that are going to improve the lives of the people of Guyana. We are pointing that out to them, and I think many of them accept that the government is not seeking to get them out of poverty, but they are doing two things. They are using these offers with the hope of influencing them politically, and two, they are using it as means of corruption. Also, one has to recognize that as the PPP is doing what it is doing, some people believe it is a unified movement in the direction of people liking what they are doing. But from my engagement, even in PPP strongholds, it is generating a lot of problems for the PPP, because a lot of times just the key PPP activists get the money, gets the hug of it, and the actual people are kept out of it. Farmers, for instance, ask me, when in Guyana they got 70,000 farmers that they give this money to. On the quarantine when we were there, in the Pomeroon, in Linden, in West Watuka, they went to Linden and they claimed to be sharing this money to farmers. The farmers in Linden are mainly in the Berbice River and in West Watuka. Most of the people in West Watuka, and the chairman will deal with this in the future, most of the people there will tell you that the farmers didn't get. And when the second vice president went to Linden Palm presenting himself, it wasn't a case that Lindeners were there. Many were brought in, that is one. And two, Linden does not have the amount of farmers that they claim that were there. And a lot of the persons that were there were not farmers, they were PPP activists. So I believe that once we do our political work, there is not much to worry about. We must worry if we don't do our political work. And let me say this to you. This is not the first time in the history of this country the PPP seeks to bribe APNU, AFC strongholds. They have done it all the years of their lives and they haven't succeeded. And I don't believe they will succeed. In fact, there is more resentment of the People's Progressive Party in APNU, AFC strongholds than there is acceptance. Yes, there will be one and two persons who will be influenced. There are always those who their main objective is money, but they are insignificant numbers, and I don't think it will impact us in the way some people want to suggest. People are, everywhere we go, people are saying, let's get rid of this government. And this is not restricted to APNU, AFC strongholds. It is also in PPP strongholds. Don't forget that the PPP elite is taking away lands from ordinary Indo-Guyanese. We are representing some of them. They are taking advantage of persons who are supportive of them but are not in the elite. So the PPP is one of our greatest helps. They are doing the things that are pushing people away from them. And so I do not believe that this approach that they are using will get them significant support, or it will affect our communities. In fact, a lot of what they're doing, I think, will damage them in the future.
All right.
If you look at also, when forget us, look at when the second vice president is going out, he has to ill-treat Guyanese because of their incompetence. A lot of work is not being done. Corruption is in the increase, and the communities aren't getting the services they need. And so it is generating a frustration and a resentment of the People's Progressive Party.
I have one.
Shanika, I just want to make a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you for the question there. So I think it is important even as we see these cash handouts go out, to understand two key things. The first is that if the PPP believes that in a country that is growing as quickly as ours, with the oil reserves we have, with the bright future ahead of it that this country has, that a little 100,000 here and there is going to satisfy anybody, that is a mistaken belief. And on top of that, we have a much more structured approach when it comes to salary top-ups, when it comes to reducing income tax on lower income individuals. And that structured approach will provide huge economic benefits that will mean that in all circumstances, we'll be providing much more to the Guyanese people than a few 100,000 here or 100,000 there. The days of people thinking that that's a lot of money are over. The PPP still has not realized that. And we're looking at a much brighter future with higher paying jobs, with better levels of education and health care, as well as the salary top-ups that we've spoken about. So while I'm sure that they will continue to hand out cash, people will soon figure out that this is 2 cents when you're supposed to be getting $1.
All right.
In fact, I want to add one more point. All across Guyana, when you go, people are saying to you they are not getting enough from our oil and gas sector, and so people will take the money, but they know there is scope with proper programs, policies, etc., for their lives to be impacted in a positive way and in a consistent way. In fact, when the second vice president has to talk about temporary jobs, he is in fact admitting that they failed. They promised 50,000 jobs. The word temporary was nowhere there. And then he is generating another conflict. Workers who are working all month are now saying that people are working 10 days and getting 40,000, and they are working all month for 70,000. So they are creating contradictions in the system that will affect them. They don't think through things. If I go to Mars tomorrow, I am dead sure I'm going to hear the vice president trying to get some mechanism to get to Mars, to make offers to the people in Mars. It is a manifestation of a lack of a plan, a lack of coherent ideas. Let us also recall that this is not the first time the PPP is taking money and doing projects here and projects there, and at the end of the day, all the projects fail. Whether it is the fiber optic cable, whether it's the Skeldon factory, we can run the whole list. Barra Jagdeo and the PPP have failed when it comes to the economic development of the country.
All right. I have one last question here from Ms. Davina Bagot, and it says, what is the opposition's position on the overall ramping up of oil production despite climate change warnings and Exxon non-adherence to the environmental safeguards such as gas flaring?
Let me put it this way. First of all, I believe that developing countries must be given environmental space. I tell you what I mean by environmental space. The developed world would have had space to use the environment and achieve their objectives. Now, as developing countries, we need to develop as well. So I believe there is some amount of environmental space that should be created. But I also believe that we have to focus on climate change and the environment generally and ensure whatever we do is sustainable. I do not think an approach which says just take out the oil, get as much money as you can be the approach. We need a more measured approach that looks into all aspects of energy security, including wind, including solar, including hydro, and then based on that, you do an analysis of where we are and ensure that production is done in a way that, one, present generation benefits, but future generations will benefit and are protected. So it is not a straight case of just ramping up oil production. I think to talk about ramping up oil production seems to fit in to the greed of the leadership of the People's Progressive Party. Produce as much as you can so I could thief it now, rather than a structured approach that allows us to protect our environment, to conserve our environment, and at the same time promote the development of our people. That to me will be a more sensible and measured approach than just talk about ramping up production in isolation from the global context and the local context.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, with no other hands raised, I do believe this brings us to the end of today's press conference. I would like to thank you for joining us once again, and do have a wonderful afternoon.